So Mendel was a pretty smart guy, but he was also a very lucky guy. He was lucky that he picked pea plants to do his research on, because pea plants are a really good plant to study when you're trying to do the basic genetic principles. They only have a certain number of alleles. They cross-pollinate very easily. It's very easy to tell the difference between their alleles. So not everything is that easy. There are some alleles that don't have dominant and recessive. There's other kinds of non-Mendelian genetics, which we're going to get into later. But y'all are just going to do a couple of practice things to study the basics of genetics first, and then later on I'll come back and talk to y'all about non-Mendelian principles, the rare things like how come there aren't just two skin colors like black and white. How is there a variation of skin colors, or how is there a variation in eye color if you only have two alleles? So genetics gets a lot more complicated than what Mendel studied, but he set up a very good foundation for us. Okay, so I'm just going to take this time to review a couple things with y'all. You have to remember that in basic Mendelian genetics, you are going to have two alleles. There are a possibility of having dominant and recessive. If I have a dominant allele, I'll always give that allele a capital letter. And if I have a recessive allele, I'll always give that a lowercase letter. It doesn't really matter what letters you pick as long as you use the same letter. So if I were talking about my white flower and my purple flower, I can't call this a lowercase y and this a capital P. I always have to use the same letter. So if I use P, this has to be a lowercase p, this has to be a capital P. If I use y or w or x, that's fine, but this needs to be a lowercase x and this has to be a capital X. So choose whatever letter you want. I like to use one that has to do with the characteristics, so I would choose P for purple, which just helps make my brain work and not get confused as easily. You also have to remember the difference between genotype and phenotype. So if I were talking about the phenotype of this flower, I would say it's white, and the phenotype of this flower is purple. If I was talking about the genotype, on the other hand, that's the letters. Those are the alleles. So a white flower will always be lowercase, two lowercase p's. And if I was talking about the purple flower, I could have two capital P's, or I could have a capital P and a lowercase b. I would have to try and do a test cross to figure out which one it is, which brings in homozygous and heterozygous. So I could have a homozygous white flower, so that would be two little p's, meaning it's homozygous recessive. I could have my purple flower could be capital B, capital P, and that means that it would be homozygous dominant. Or my purple flower could be capital P, lowercase p, which means that it would be heterozygous. So those are all the vocabulary words that you really need to become familiar with. That is basically the end of basic genetics. I know I'm not there and this went kind of fast, so if y'all have any questions, just send me a message through email or send it to me on Facebook, and I hope this helped y'all.